just do this. Just follow this instruction manual and switch out these foods for these foods. And, this is how you move your body. This is how you perform intermittent fasting and beyond. And if you just follow this program, then you will find that you can completely eliminate insulin resistance and lower your chronic disease risk overall.
Hi there. Welcome to another episode of Seeking Voices of Health, Healing, and Hope. I'm happy to have Dr. Cyrus Khambatta here on the show. So let's get to it. I was really excited to see you here. So thank you so much for being here. I wanted to ask you, you have started this amazing company, organization, and really been a pioneer in the world of diabetes and also in plant-based nutrition. And I wanted to go back a little bit in time, and I wanted you to tell me a little bit about your path. Tell me about your illness with type 1 diabetes. As you know, I have rheumatoid arthritis, so I find your illness near and dear to my heart. So tell me a little bit about your life and growing up with type 1, and how did it lead you to this ultimately getting this PhD?
Yeah, thank you. By the way, Dr. Monica, I love talking with you. I could talk with you for hours, and I totally appreciate the invitation to be here on the podcast.
Yay.
So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So yeah, you bring up a good question here, which is you have an autoimmune condition, right? I have an autoimmune condition, and there are many other people who are living with any number of autoimmune conditions that seem to be going up in prevalence over the course of time. And it's unfortunate because, we live in a time where there's more information available to human beings at any moment. But yet the rates of chronic disease, including autoimmune disease, seem to be going up and up and up and up and up. And it's unfortunate, right? So information, there's a gap between the information that's available and the health of the public. So I am also, you can call myself a victim of the same idea, but the idea is that I developed type 1 diabetes actually not when I was a kid. Most people develop type 1 diabetes when they're 3 years old, 5 years old, 8 years old, maybe 12 years old, something like that, as a young child. And I actually developed it when I was 22. So that's a pretty late diagnosis for somebody living with type 1 diabetes. But what happened to me was that I was a senior at Stanford University, and I was just trying to graduate and move on with my life. I was studying mechanical engineering, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I got real thirsty. And I'm not talking like, oh, I think I want to go drink a glass of water thirsty. I'm talking, I can't think about anything else other than drinking water or drinking something that's going to kill this thirst that is literally driving me crazy. Wow. I mean, it's hard to describe just how thirsty I felt. And in addition to that, I also started losing a lot of energy to the point where I would eat a plate of food, and then it was almost like I was comatose after eating that food. I would kind of fall asleep at the table. And my friends at the time didn't really say anything to me about that, but they definitely did recognize as something was wrong. So I remember it was 2002. It was November. I was studying for finals, and I just couldn't concentrate. And I'm sitting there and I'm trying to go through these heat transfer classes and mechanics. And this is very complex information. And I was my brain is not working properly. I don't understand.
I don't think I've ever known how to do heat transfer. So
yeah, good. That's one of the things in life that you can completely eliminate. Never learn how to do that because it is complex. But as I was going through the process, I was like, okay, I recognize this stuff is hard. I recognize that this requires a lot of thought, but my brain just does not work properly. It is not working the way that it's supposed to. And in addition to that, this thirst is killing me. So I drank a quart of water, put my glass down, and then I was like, yep, thirstier. Put another one, put my glass down, got thirstier. Drank some Gatorade, put that down, got thirstier. So I called my sister. She's a doctor of osteopathy. She's a family practice medicine. She's in family practice. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant woman. And I explained all my symptomology to her. And I was like, yeah, I'm frequently urinating. I'm going every 30 minutes. I'm cramping when I go to sleep at night. I don't understand. She knew exactly what it was. She knew exactly. This was a textbook. So she said, Cyrus, drop everything you're doing right now. Go straight to the health center. You have type 1 diabetes. And I was like, what? Type 1, what are you talking about? I didn't know anything about diabetes. Nothing. All I knew is I had an association between diabetes and old people and diabetes and cake. That was literally it. And I was like, okay, I'm not elderly. I don't eat cake. I don't know what you're talking about. So she said, Cyrus, I'm going to explain this to you later, but just go to the hospital. So I go straight to the health center. They diagnosed me. They checked my blood glucose while I was in the health center. My blood glucose was north of 600, even though it was supposed to be between 80 and approximately 80 and 130. They transferred me to the hospital. They gave me a drip irrigation of saline to hydrate me. They gave me a drip irrigation of insulin to bring my blood glucose down. And within 24 hours, discharged from the hospital. Sorry, Cyrus, not only do you have type 1 diabetes, an autoimmune version of diabetes, but you also have Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, and you also have alopecia universalis, which is complete hair loss. All three of them you developed over the course of the last 6 months. So here I am, a 22-year-old kid,
Wow.
just trying to move on with my life, trying to like get to the next level. And all of a sudden I'm like, what? I have 3 chronic diseases. And not only do I have 3 chronic diseases, but one of them, type 1 diabetes, requires that I have this whole arsenal of stuff that I carry around with me. I have to have a blood glucose meter. I have to have test strips. I got to have prescription for multiple types of insulin. I got to have syringes. I got to have a carbohydrate counting guide. I have to be very neurotic about what I eat, when I eat, how much I eat, when do I go to sleep, how well am I hydrated, how much am I exercising, and all of this set in, within a very short period of time. So,
and did they prepare you? I mean, you were discharged in 24 hours. How could you possibly have been ready for that? That's crazy.
It's impossible.
I've never even heard that. I've never heard of a discharge. I mean, I'm a doctor in the hospital. Like I can't imagine discharging somebody after 24 hours like that.
I know. I mean, it was kind of bonkers to me too. The whole thing was so fast. And when I did get discharged, they basically gave me a strategy. It's like, imagine trying to teach somebody, calculus in 24 hours and be like, oh, hey, by the way, just scribble some of this stuff down. See you later. And you're like, you don't know anything at that point. You're just like beginning the process of learning the game. But what they did tell me was that the only way that they knew how to keep blood glucose low and prevent my insulin use from going up over the course of time was to eat a low carbohydrate diet. That was it. Right. So their methodology, they literally gave me this book, this little like cheat sheet manual that had a bunch of carbohydrate values for foods that you commonly eat. They said, use this, keep this in your back pocket. And this is going to be your like carbohydrate counting Bible. And your goal is to minimize your carbohydrate intake to as low as possible. And by doing that, you will be able to keep your blood glucose controlled and you will be able to use the smallest amount of insulin necessary. And both of those are good things. Go for it. So I was like, all right, cool. You're telling a 22-year-old guy who's already an athlete, I'm a weightlifter, I play soccer. Great. Now you get to eat more meat and cheese and bacon and fish and cheese and dairy products. And I was like, great. I love those foods. I can't wait to do this. So I started to adopt that low carbohydrate methodology. I started eating those foods. Within the first year, the 2 promises that they had given me, lower blood glucose and preventing my insulin use from going up, both of them were flat out false. And I don't mean to insinuate that my medical team was misleading me, but it just did not work for me, period, end of story. My blood glucose became a roller coaster. Any given moment of any day, I could check my glucose and it could be as low as 40, dangerously hypoglycemic, or it could be as high as 400. And this was happening on a daily basis. So I was kind of ping-ponging between high, low, high, low, high, low, high, low, despite the fact that I was following their directions and I was keeping my carbohydrate intake low. So it took me about a year of living this way. And not only was my glucose hard to control, not only did my insulin use go from 25 upwards of 55 units per day, but I was losing more energy and I couldn't exercise as well. And my muscles were really getting very tight and very stiff. And that frustrated me because I like to exercise every single day. And I just could not do that. I became a little bit anxious. I became a little bit depressed. I had to go check myself in to go talk to a mental health specialist because I was like, I'm losing my mind. I'm 23 years old now. And all of a sudden I feel like I'm in the body of an 80-year-old kid. Like, what am I doing wrong? Explain this to me. Right. So long story short, I ended up learning about different ways that I could eat. And I opened my mind to the idea that maybe there's a different way. So I came across this idea of eating a plant-based diet. And I learned from a guy named Dr. Doug Graham. And this was back in 2003 again. And he took me under his wing and he said, Cyrus, I'm going to teach you how to eat a vegan diet. And your life is going to change in front of you and you're not even going to understand what's happening. And I was like, great. If you can give me a promise like that, I'm into it, but I'm also like skeptical because I was given another promise and it didn't come true. So under his
what
guidance,
made you do it? What made you do it? I mean, how did you reconcile with the fact that a plant-based diet has more carbohydrates and that was totally opposite of what they told you in the hospital? How'd you reconcile that?
Okay. I mean, I didn't reconcile it. Let's put it that way. I basically had a willing suspension of disbelief that if I were to eat the way that he was describing, and having had a couple of conversations with him, he seemed like a very, very intelligent guy. I had a willing suspension of disbelief that maybe this could lead to a better outcome.
And maybe
And
what
I
did
was in
you,
a deep
maybe
dark
what did
hole.
you have to lose? Maybe you felt like, what do I have to lose?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was in such a deep dark hole. I was at my rock bottom at that point. I mean, there were days where I would come home from work, I would check my blood glucose, it would be 286. And I remember one day I just picked up my blood glucose meter and I threw it against the wall and it smashed into 1,000 pieces. And I was like, this is dumb. What am I doing? Like, this isn't working. Right. And then I would just like fall into the couch and I would start crying because I was so frustrated. So anything was better than that.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, cool. Well, I don't even care. Like, if you can get my health to be even 10% better, it's worth the time and the effort and the money. Let's go for it. So I travel to Colorado. I'm under his tutelage for a week. I go through a sports camp with him. He basically teaches me how to start eating a very carbohydrate rich diet that's rich in fruits and vegetables. So I literally started for the first week eating nothing but fruit and vegetables. I eliminated red meat, white meat, chicken, fish, dairy products, all oils, and any processed meats and eggs. Within the first week, my blood glucose fell so quickly and came down so significantly that I had to back off on the amount of insulin I was giving myself. Within 1 week, I backed off on my insulin use by 42%, which is a massive change for someone living with type 1. But here's the kicker. I wasn't lowering my insulin use and getting better blood glucose because I was eating a low carb diet like my doctors had told me. I was now eating a freakishly high carbohydrate diet with 600 to 700 grams of carbohydrate per day. And yet, despite that, my glucose was coming down and my A1C was coming down and my insulin use was coming down. So that's where it got really interesting, because I was like, okay, hold on. I got a scientific brain. I want to understand what is the biochemistry underlying this. And I got some really good explanations from Doug, and I started reading a little bit more information. And I was like, you know what? This seems like an untapped resource. This seems like there's something very important happening here, but yet I can't fully explain it in the way that I want to. So I studied for 2 years and I started devouring information, molecular cellular biology, nutritional biochemistry, organic chemistry, everything you could possibly imagine, because I just wanted to learn biology, and I was very feverish about it. I then went to graduate school and I spent 5 years at UC Berkeley. And there I was given an opportunity to do a PhD under one of the world's authorities, top-notch authorities in carbohydrate metabolism. And he basically gave me an opportunity to dive really deep into this thing called insulin resistance, the precursor for prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, and the thing that complicates blood glucose control in all forms of diabetes and beyond. And as a result of being there, I was able to really arm myself with the knowledge and tools to understand what the heck is this thing? What controls your blood glucose value? Why does blood glucose control get complicated over the course of time? And most importantly, how can you improve blood glucose control and lower chronic disease risk using your food as medicine?
Wow, that sounds awesome. So what's the 60-second version there? What's the 60-second version of insulin resistance? Can you dumb down for the simple-minded me how to do 60 seconds of insulin resistance? I mean, that's an important concept that I think people don't fully understand. And I would love I'd love to hear you explain it.
For sure. Simple-minded Monica. Haha, what a funny concept. Far from simple-minded here. All right, I'll try it. 60 seconds. Here we go. Most people believe that insulin resistance is caused by the consumption of sugar and carbs. Everywhere you go on the internet, you'll read that information. It turns out that insulin resistance can be induced by refined sugars, but insulin resistance is more repeatably induced by a high-fat diet. So when you consume a diet that is greater than approximately 15% of calories that come in the source of lipid, you end up storing significant amounts of fat inside of your liver and muscle tissue, where your liver and muscle can only store small amounts of fat. So you end up accumulating too much lipid inside of both of those tissues. And as a result of that, those tissues decrease their ability to signal with insulin, decrease their ability to communicate with insulin. And they block insulin from allowing glucose to come inside of those cells. So as a result of that, when you eat a fat-rich diet, AKA a low carbohydrate diet, you develop insulin resistance in your muscle and liver. Then you try and eat something carbohydrate rich, like a banana or a bowl of quinoa or a bowl of black beans. And before you know it, your blood glucose is high. It's very easy to point a finger at the banana and say, darn you, banana, darn you, potato. The reason my glucose is high is because you're high in carbs, and carbs are bad for me. But in reality, it's not the carbohydrate rich food's fault. It is everything you ate before the carbohydrate rich food that set the stage for insulin resistance, that created a metabolic traffic jam inside of your liver and muscle. And as a result of that, your blood glucose goes high. So the simple way to reverse it is basically to dramatically lower your total fat intake. That clears out a lot of the lipid that's accumulated inside of your liver and muscle. And as a result of that, you can restore insulin signaling inside of both of those tissues, and your blood glucose comes down, A1C comes down, and insulin resistance can fade away into the background.
No, it was so beautiful. Whoa, I think you did it in less than 60. I think you used a couple of beautiful terms that I really liked. I liked the metabolic traffic jam.
Okay.
I think that's a really interesting way to say it. And I think that your story clearly is a testament to the changes. And I do like that you say that it's the stuff that you did before you ate the banana that is the problem, that it's not the banana. And I think that's really important, because so many people focus on that banana or that oatmeal or that quinoa, and then they forget that they put all this other milieu in ahead of time. So
Correct.
how do you tell people then to change? Like, how do you tell your patients to start? Because telling people to cut their fat is very difficult. And how do you get people to do it? I mean, especially for, the diabetics that have been doing this for 15 years and they've been told to eat low carbs, it's such an emotional shift to shift. And then they put on all this weight and adiposity and just being like, oh, you just need to cut a whole lot of fat out. How do you get people to do it?
Yeah, it's a great question. If I had the solution to that, then I would be retired at this point. Yeah. But the truth is that when you eat foods that come from the whole plant world, okay, when you eat whole plant rich foods, including fruits, starchy vegetables, non-starchy vegetables, legumes, and whole grains predominantly. Okay, when you focus on those food groups as being the source of most of your calories, you don't have to try. Your fat intake is low naturally because those foods are low in fat. It's just that simple. Okay, if I took you and I put you into the woods and you went in on a backpacking trip with me for 2 weeks, and all we had to do was try and find food that we would be living on for that period of 2 weeks, okay, you would have one of two choices. You either try and gather food and like dig for it in the ground or find it on trees, or you would have to go kill an animal. The truth is that killing animals is actually it's a very challenging thing to do. And it would take a long time for you to be able to figure out how to master that. And then you'd have to make sure that you get enough calories from it. So an easier way to find calories is actually to just hunt for it or, gather it by finding it on trees and finding it in the ground. The same concept exists when you opt for foods that are grown in the ground, grown on the ground, and grown from trees. Mother Nature does a phenomenal job of providing foods for you that are actually naturally low in fat. If you look at the sort of the macronutrient profile of most of the fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains, what you'll find is that those foods tend to be 70 to 90% carbohydrate rich. And then the balance is found in fat and protein. So they're naturally high in carbohydrate, low in fat, low in protein. Okay. So like you said, it's not a question of I could just tell you, hey, Dr. Monica, I want you to eat these foods and I want you to lower these foods. And you could be like, all right, cool. Sounds like a plan. But the problem is that most humans are not soldiers and can't just make a switch for one food for the other. And then everything is good. It turns out that we are emotional creatures. What a strange concept, right? And we have all these preconceived notions of what we think is true. We have a lot of knowledge that we bring to the table. We have a lot of habits that we've created over the course of time. And it takes time to rewrite all that information. And so that's when people bring their emotion to the table and say, oh, well, I really opt for drinking a glass of wine and I really like to eat potato chips when I've had a hard day at work. Okay. That's not biology. That's just pure, that's a habitual response. And so rewriting those habits definitely takes time. There's no question about it. But as far as understanding exactly what foods to eat, it's very, very straightforward and extremely simple. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I love it. And it's why you wrote that beautiful international bestseller, Mastering Diabetes. I mean, you have this beautiful program that you have created. Tell us about Mastering Diabetes. Tell us about that book. Why should people pick it up? And versus doing your program, or is it do the book and then the program? How do you advise people?
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. So yeah, we wrote the book Mastering Diabetes. When I say we, it's me and my co-founder, Robbie Barbero.
Who
He
is
also has type
awesome,
1 diabetes.
who's amazing as well.
Yeah, thank you. And so the two of us basically, we wrote Mastering Diabetes. It took us 3 years to write the book, and we released it in 2020, right before the pandemic. And the book basically outlines, it's broken into 3 parts. The first part is our own personal stories. Robbie has a pretty interesting story as well. So the first part of the book is our stories. The next part is about the science that your doctor didn't tell you, okay? Or the science that maybe your doctor doesn't even know. All right. It's the science of insulin resistance that seems to be very confusing on the internet, but we tried to break it down into very, very, very simple concepts that help you connect the dots between what has happened to you and what symptoms you're experiencing and what is actually happening underneath the surface inside of your liver and inside of your muscle, inside of your brain, inside of your vasculature. Okay. The third part of the book is the program. And basically it says, just do this. Just follow this instruction manual and switch out these foods for these foods. And, this is how you move your body. This is how you perform intermittent fasting and beyond. And if you just follow this program, then you will find that you can completely eliminate insulin resistance and lower your chronic disease risk overall. So the feedback that we've gotten from people is that it's very helpful. And they found that, reading the book helps them really unlock ideas that they never even were presented with, even though they had been living with diabetes for 20, 30, 40, 50 years sometimes, which is great to hear. But then a lot of people say, hey, you know what, there's a lot of stuff in here. And I don't exactly know how to do this. I don't know when to make these changes. I don't know how quickly to make these changes. I don't know where to eat food outside. What about when I travel? What about Thanksgiving? What about the Super Bowl party? How quickly should I be losing weight? Blah, 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 blah. There's a whole collection of questions that come into your head. So that's why we created an actual coaching program to go along with the book. Okay. The coaching program is actually something that we've been running for now 5 years. We've run easily over 10,000 people through our coaching program. And we've seen some absolutely life-changing performances. People come in overweight, have high A1C values, high fasting blood glucose values, heavily medicated, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. And they go through the Mastering Diabetes method. And before they know it, their A1C is down, their blood pressure is down, their cholesterol levels down. They're able to lose anywhere from the smallest amount of weight loss that we consistently see is 13 to 15 pounds. But there are some people who have gone through our program and lost 150 pounds over the course of time, obviously.
Amazing. I love hearing that.
The weight loss is insane. And also the average medication reduction, we actually published a scientific paper on this and found that the average medication reduction was 52%. But that's just an average. And there are some people who are completely eliminating medication altogether. And the average insulin reduction is even greater. And we're in the process of actually trying to publish some of those results to see what kind of a reduction in insulin we get. But I can tell you from personal use, I reduced my insulin use by 42%. Other people have reduced their insulin use anywhere from 30 to 60%. So it's a very dramatic collection of results. So to answer your question here, if you are the type of person that can basically pick up a book and just do exactly what the book says, by all means, go get the book, and it's $14 and everything will be fine. But if you're like most people who want a community, want coach, want accountability, and want to have a step-by-step system that can truly teach you exactly what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, then I would recommend joining the Mastering Diabetes program. And we have a thing called the 6-week blood sugar transformation challenge. And basically we guarantee you that if you come take this challenge, within the first 6 weeks, you will see a dramatic reduction, a significant reduction in your fasting blood glucose value. And you will begin the process of losing weight in the direction of your ideal body weight. And we give you literally a 100% money back guarantee. So if anybody's interested in performing this and coming into the 6-week blood sugar transformation challenge, we highly recommend it. It's very, very effective.
I love it. It's amazing. And, I said, I have many patients that have come to you and worked with you and through your coaching program. And I really like the coaching program in particular because, as a physician, as you know, we don't have a whole lot of time to spend with our patients to go through in detail. So sometimes I struggle, especially with diabetics, where I can't give them enough information, and I really like referring them your way. I think it's important to just point out briefly that the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes, because I don't want people to come away thinking that type 1 diabetics will come off of their insulin.
Correct.
And so I just want to make sure that maybe you could just speak to that up for a minute.
Yeah, great distinction. I'm glad we're talking about this. Okay. So like we talked about earlier, I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and anybody who is living with type 1 or in fact type 1 or 1.5 diabetes has an autoimmune condition. Okay. The autoimmune condition is when your own immune system attacks the insulin producing beta cells inside of your pancreas and decreases the size of that population. And as a result of that, your ability to manufacture what's called endogenous insulin, your own manufactured insulin, goes down significantly. As a result of that, when beta cells die, beta cells don't come back. Okay. So we don't have any therapy that's been demonstrated in a repeatable manner that can recover beta cell death or, reverse beta cell death. So as a result of that, those who experience an autoimmune attack of their beta cells will likely have an autoimmune condition for the rest of their life. Okay. So in that scenario, you have to inject insulin from the outside world. You have to inject it either using an insulin pump or an insulin syringe or an insulin pen. And that is making up for the insulin that you no longer manufacture. And that insulin is required for normal metabolic function. And it's required to help you metabolize the food that you're eating. Glucose plus amino acids from protein plus fatty acids from triglyceride. So all of it is necessary. The trick here,
normal, just to clarify, say that one more time, is that it would be normal for a type 1 or a 1.5 to take insulin no matter what for the rest of their life, because those beta cells, once you have beta cell dysfunction, and you cannot recover that. So you will require insulin, but you can adjust the amount.
Yes, exactly right. You nailed it on the head. So let's say that you took me and my doppelganger twin brother who doesn't actually exist, but the two of us are, we're twin brothers. We have effectively the same genetic code, the same genetic information. Okay. You could take one of us and you could feed us a low carbohydrate diet. And you could take the other person and you could feed them a low fat plant-based whole food diet, the way that we describe in the Mastering Diabetes method. And you will get completely different outcomes. Okay. Both people have the same genetic information. Both people have an autoimmune version of type 1 diabetes, but one person, okay, the person who's eating the low carbohydrate diet, what they are likely to experience is that their blood glucose stays nice and low. And initially over the first 6 to 12 months, and then over the course of time, their cholesterol level will increase dramatically, their LDL cholesterol level, their blood pressure may increase dramatically. They might find it very hard to lose weight, or they may start gaining weight over the course of time. And their all-cause mortality, AKA premature death risk increases dramatically. So those are things that you have to take into account. You get good short-term results, but not so good long-term results on a low carbohydrate diet. You take the second person, okay, same genetic material, you feed them a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet, and what you will find is that they will be able to control their blood glucose very nicely, and their A1C will come down, their blood pressure will come down, their cholesterol will come down, and they will be able to maintain all of those biomarkers over the course of time. By eating that way, they're able to significantly lower their chronic disease risk because they have significantly improved their insulin sensitivity. Okay. So the take home message here is that the two approaches are fundamentally different than one another. The low carbohydrate dieter is likely to increase their insulin needs over the course of time because eating that way actually fuels the insulin resistance fire. So they actually increase their insulin usage over the course of time. And that's very, very problematic. The low fat plant-based whole food eater is going to keep their insulin use nice and low, and it will likely stay very low over the course of time. And what you can do is just fast forward 5 to 10 to 15 years and take a look at the chronic disease risk of these two individuals. And you'll find from the scientific research that the people who are eating the low carbohydrate diet end up with significantly worse health in the long term.
That's great. I mean, that's a great explanation. Thank you. And maybe just say also, do you think that type 2 diabetes patients, so now type 1 is the autoimmune and the significant beta cell dysfunction cannot produce insulin, always require insulin, albeit a small amount on a whole food plant-based diet, versus the type 2 diabetic who can that type 2 diabetic come off of insulin? Okay,
great question. So in the pathology leading towards type 2 diabetes, you first have non-diabetic individual, normal weight, normal beta cell physiology, normal glucose metabolism. The normal individual can develop insulin resistance. Insulin resistance, again, is this fire that sort of like begins inside of your liver and muscle, excess accumulated lipid over the course of time that then sets the stage for insulin a decrease in insulin action. Insulin resistance, if left untreated or if it grows over the course of time, can turn into pre-diabetes, which is just a warning flag. Hey, look, your A1C is elevating, your fasting blood glucose is elevating, your disease risk is going up. You might want to make some changes. If insulin resistance continues to grow over the course of time and is left uncorrected, then pre-diabetes can turn into type 2 diabetes. Now, type 2 diabetes is still a situation where you have, in most cases, still adequately functioning beta cells. It's not a question of how much insulin you can manufacture at the level of your pancreas. It is a question of how much insulin resistance exists inside of your liver and muscle. What people fail to understand is that diabetes is mainly driven by the condition of your liver and driven by the condition of your muscle. Period. End of story. If you can dramatically improve your liver health and dramatically improve your muscle health, then type 2 diabetes can go away over the course of time. Okay. So the progression goes normal individual, insulin resistant, pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes. The final stage is type 2 diabetes that now has been prescribed insulin in order to help them regulate their blood glucose because they are so insulin resistant that they simply just cannot manufacture enough insulin. Okay. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stages.
So well said. And I think that the key is you're showing them, and I think that's what people don't understand, the difference between type 1 and type 2, which I really wanted to go through. And then, but that the type 2 is a spectrum, right?
Correct.
And that understanding that there's parts of the timeline, there's a significant part of the timeline where you can reverse and come off all medication. And so, but there is a point, yes, there is sort of this point where it becomes more and more challenging, especially as you said, once they start insulin, because your own beta cells aren't doing what they need to do.
Exactly right. So I'm curious, in your practice, I know that you've also helped a lot of people living with diabetes, adopt a whole food plant-based diet and reverse insulin resistance and reverse a lot of the associated complications that come along with it. Have you worked with patients that have type 2 diabetes and are insulin dependent and gotten them from that stage all the way back to non-insulin dependent, completely normal?
So great question. So if they are on, so I don't, two things. So when I take care of patients who are diabetic, who are resistant, pre-diabetic or type 2, and I start them on medications, there are many patients I take off medicine, but your point about insulin is important. And every so often I can get somebody completely off insulin, but that's a rarity. Most of the time they're going to be, if they've started insulin, it's hard to get them off, but I do have some, because I do think that sometimes there's people's sugars are so high that people quickly jump to insulin, but they still have some level of their beta cells are still working. And I'm able to get them back, but that's not as common. Okay.
So there is one research paper that I want to just sort of like talk about here real quickly, because it's really important. This happened back in 1979. It was written by two individuals. One of them is named James W. Anderson. He was the primary author. And then his colleague, Kylene Ward. Okay. And they wrote a paper in which they took 30 individuals who were living with type 2 diabetes and transitioned them to eating a plant-based diet. Now, the individuals that they enrolled for the study were those that were insulin dependent. So they were type 2, but they were told to inject insulin, and they'd been given a prescription for insulin in order to help manage their blood glucose. Okay. He then switched them on to eating a plant-based diet. But here's the trick. He told them that under no circumstances can you lose a single pound in my study. You are not allowed to lose weight. All I'm going to do is flip the food that you're eating from a low carbohydrate to a low fat diet. But under no circumstances can you lose weight. And if you do lose weight, I'm just going to force feed you and make you eat a little bit more so that you don't lose any weight. And patients were like, okay, cool, sweet. Let's see if we can make this happen. So they started this study, and they flipped the diet of these individuals. And what they were trying to determine is how did their insulin requirements change over the course of time? And what they found was absolutely astonishing. More than 50% of those patients were able to discontinue the use of insulin completely, 100% complete. So in truth, they didn't actually need insulin.
Yeah.
They were just given insulin because they couldn't control their blood glucose otherwise. So more than 50% of them were able to discontinue their use of insulin completely. And the best part was that those 50% that reduced their use of insulin completely did so in 16 days.
Hmm.
16 days. I'm not talking months. I'm not talking years, right? A very short period of time by making a significant change to their diet. And all of a sudden now their insulin requirements went to zero. The remainder of the individuals saw a significant reduction in their insulin use. They didn't go to zero, but they definitely saw a reduction in their insulin use. And they also saw a reduction in cardiovascular risk because their LDL cholesterol also came down similarly, right? So that just kind of shows you that, like, is weight loss necessary? The answer is no, it actually isn't necessary. Is weight loss helpful? Yes, it absolutely is. But even if you are insulin dependent, you've been prescribed insulin, you can go from insulin dependent to type 2, non-insulin dependent. Then you can go from type 2 to prediabetes to insulin resistant, and insulin resistant all the way back to normal. And again, just like you're saying, it doesn't happen for 100% of all people, but it's definitely a reversible condition. And it's very important that people understand that the power is truly within their hands.
Amazing. And I think it's important for people to hear that, is that, and a lot of people, as I mentioned, a lot of people I think that are on insulin don't necessarily require that insulin. And there were sort of other methods along the way, and they're not dependent on that insulin. And so those are easier people to easier take off of insulin. And I love that study. I'm going to look it up. I wrote it down. So thank you for sharing that.
For sure. For sure.
Let me ask you something about intermittent fasting, because I know you're a fan of intermittent fasting. So how do you, as a type 1, intermittently fast, knowing that you have to follow your insulin requirements, and do you worry that you could become hypoglycemic? Because these are comments or questions I hear in clinic all the time, but I'm type 1, I have to eat. How do you reconcile that with intermittent fasting?
Okay, this is a great question. So if you're living with type 1 diabetes, like we talked about, you're insulin dependent. So you have to inject insulin from the outside world. Now, when you are living with type 1 diabetes, doing a prolonged intermittent fast can certainly become problematic. And the term prolonged means anything longer than approximately 24 hours. Okay. So I do not recommend that people living with insulin dependent diabetes fast for anything longer than 24 hours. Okay. You can fast for anywhere between 0 and 24 hours, and it is perfectly safe. The thing to take into account is that, there's two types of insulin administration. The first one is called basal insulin administration. The second one is called bolus insulin. Okay. So for those living with type 1, they know exactly what this means. Basal mimics the action of your beta cells. So Dr. Monica, you don't have diabetes, but your beta cells inside of your pancreas are manufacturing insulin and putting it into your blood right now as we speak. It is happening. You're just not doing it in very large quantities because you're not eating food. Okay. But 24 hours a day under normal circumstances, your beta cells are drip feeding insulin into your blood. And that is known as your basal insulin output, or your basal insulin secretion. And that is totally normal. In addition to that, when you do go eat food, your beta cells are going to secrete a larger bolus of insulin. And that's required in order to help you metabolize the food that you just ate. So people with type 1 diabetes have to do the same thing. They have to sort of mimic their basal insulin secretion and also inject bolus insulin when they're eating food. Okay. So if you're performing a 24-hour intermittent fast, the most important thing that you're going to have to do is basically eliminate your bolus insulin because you're not eating food. Okay. So let's just do some simple math on this one. Suppose I inject 25 units of insulin per day, and 12 of them are basal units and 12 of them are bolus units. If I'm going to fast for 24 hours, I'm going to eliminate those 12 units of bolus insulin. They're just not going to happen because I'm not eating food. If the 12 units of basal insulin that I am injecting into myself using a basal insulin like Lantus or Basaglar or any of those other formulations, or if I am injecting it using an insulin pump and I have the right amount being injected, then in theory, my blood glucose should stay nice and stable for a 24-hour period. Okay. So in fact, an intermittent fast is a tool that we recommend people with type 1 diabetes use to check their basal insulin secretion or their basal insulin therapy to make sure that it is actually set properly.
I do struggle with explaining to people that we're just going to adjust the insulin down, but I just like the way you explained it in terms of the basal versus bolus. I love it. I just thought that was a great explanation. And I think that I'm hoping that I can, implement. I have trouble with my type 1s, if I'm being honest, and my type 1 diabetics, and that's why I often send them your way, is because type 1 diabetics get very nervous about cutting out their bolus dosing and fasting. And so when I sort of try to work with them, it's very difficult because endocrinologists they don't like the change, and they don't like me to disrupt things. How do you work with endocrinologists
Right.
and deal with that? Because that's something I've struggled with, because patients they say, well, my endocrinologist really wants me to do it this way. And how have you been able to kind of make peace with that? Do you talk to endocrinologists directly, or do you just kind of explain the science enough to the patient that they're able to make the change and take that leap of faith like you did?
It's a great question. Endocrinologists tend to be some of the harder doctors to work with because I don't exactly know the reason why. And I'm not like talking smack about endocrinologists in any way, but we have noticed over the course of time that when our clients take the information that they learned from the Mastering Diabetes book or from the program, and they present it to their endocrinologist and say, hey, I'm doing this program, what should I do here? The general feedback that they get is, oh, that's dangerous. You shouldn't do that. That's bad for you. Something bad is going to happen to you, right? Even though that's patently false information. So in reality, what we do is we don't necessarily interact with their endocrinologist directly, because it's actually kind of hard to make that happen. Instead, we work with a partner company, and they're called Plant-Based Telehealth. And Plant-Based Telehealth is a collection of doctors that are not actually endocrinologists. They're anywhere from family practice to emergency medicine to internal medicine. And they are very, very, very well trained. They all have the lifestyle medicine. They're all board certified in lifestyle medicine.
But they're also they're MDs and DOs, and they're certified in allopathic medicine as well, and that's important.
Exactly right. Yeah. So they're certified in allopathic medicine. They're MDs. They're DOs, and they also happen to be board certified in lifestyle medicine. And so we tell our clients to go speak with them and make an appointment and make a relationship with them. And from those doctors, they're able to get a different methodology, a different strategy. And that strategy falls in line with the Mastering Diabetes method, which is food first.
Nice.
Food first. So if you take this food first approach, what you start to recognize is that, yeah, there are times when medication is necessary, and there are times when procedures are necessary, but we're going to opt for food first. And if we can solve problems using food, great, we'll do that. And then if necessary, we can move down the medication train and then try and figure out how we can supplement your whole food plant-based diet using pharmaceutical medication.
I love that. I love Lori and the plant-based telehealth team too. So I'm so glad you supported them and said that.
Absolutely.
And I also like that you said something very important, that taking medications isn't failure. And sometimes you need a medication or a procedure done, and there shouldn't be this. Sometimes I think in this plant-based community, people who are on medication or who had to have a procedure, everybody's like, oh my God, is that person plant-based? How could that happen? And I think that judgment is really tricky. And I think that I just want us to stay away from that. And it should always be food first, but some people are sicker than others. Some people will require medication, and there should be no shame in that. I mean, it's always food first, but sometimes there's medicine, and that's okay, and again, everybody's coming from where they come from, and you get where you get, and we just try to push you a little bit further. And that's what we want for people, and, to feel better like I do and like you do. And I think that's key. Tell me something. Okay. Now I'm really curious. What are your favorite meals? Like what is it that Cyrus Khambatta likes to eat, like in a normal day?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually want to hear your favorite meals as well.
Okay, I'll tell you. Yeah.
Okay. So I love eating in the AM hours. My strategy is just try and eat as much fruit as possible. Okay. So what I do in the morning when I wake up is I usually eat on the order of like 2 to 3 bananas and maybe like a mango, something like that. Okay. I'm also a pretty active guy, so I'll go to the gym in the morning hours. So I'll eat some of that food before the gym. I'll go to the gym, and then I'll eat a little bit more food after the gym. Then in the late AM hours, I tend to have a giant smoothie bowl because I'm a hungry guy. So,
and you did all that exercise, you're going to need some food.
Exactly right. I gotta refill a lot of calories at that point. So, acai, like frozen acai berries, along with some, frozen mixed berries, put some more bananas in there, whatever fruits are in season. If pears are in season, if peaches are in season, if dates are in season, great. I'll put those in the bowl, and then I will basically consume that, usually sometime around lunchtime. Then the afternoon rolls around, and that's when I kind of switch over into chickpea mode. Okay. I am obsessed with chickpeas, absolutely obsessed with chickpeas, because not only are they tasty, not only are they filling, but they just, every time I eat chickpeas, I'm just a happy dude. Okay. They're very versatile, and you can cook them in 1,000 different ways. And no matter how you eat them, I just get a lot of joy out of them. So in the afternoon hours, I will usually opt for something that's like chickpea rich, whether it's a chickpea salad or whether it's literally just like plain chickpeas with a little bit of like paprika on top of it. And then usually by the time
Do you ever eat hummus?
So it's funny. I like to eat the chickpeas whole. My wife loves to eat chickpeas as hummus.
I see.
So we have this funny conversation where she's also a chickpea fanatic, but doesn't think about it that way. And so she's there sitting there eating hummus, and I'm actually eating the whole chickpea. And then usually dinner time rolls around, and that's when I'll opt for more vegetables. So at that point, I'll be eating things like potatoes. I may have some more chickpeas. I may have some more black beans. I may have some pinto beans to go along with that. And then usually some type of like salad concoction. The salad usually has like some leafy green vegetable. Maybe it has spinach in it. It's got some non-starchy vegetables like lettuce and cucumbers. And then it also has some cruciferous vegetables like broccoli or cauliflower. And that's pretty much a full day for me. I have to eat on the order of 3,000 to 3,400 calories per day just to maintain my activity level. And I find that by using that strategy, I'm able to eat a lot of calories, and I love it. It tastes great.
That's great. I love it.
How about you?
Okay. So I, for breakfast will often have, or morning, I don't know if my meals are a little different because I often don't have like a quote unquote dinner meal. But I often have breakfast, which could be steel cut oats, with a million blueberries. Then yeah, I'm obsessed with blueberries. And I'm also obsessed with chickpeas. So that's why I smiled when you said chickpeas, because I love it. I
love it.
My kids are always like, Mom, chickpeas are not a snack. I'm like, why not? Chickpeas are amazing.
Oh, they are. Absolutely.
I walk around popping chickpeas all day. It's ridiculous. Every salad has, chickpeas in it. So, there's also some some diabetes data with chickpeas that's never really panned out clearly for me, but it also is another reason that I like eating chickpeas. I'm like, they're a complex carb, and they're delicious, and I love them. So I'm obsessed with them too. So for breakfast, I usually eat oats. Sometimes I'll eat, sometimes I'll have flax seeds and almond milk and a little bit of berries if I want. Sometimes I'll eat my one thing I do love to eat is I have 100% whole wheat bread that I will eat with hummus and loads of hummus and like sprouts and fruit. So those are typically my 3 main breakfasts. For lunch, I have a salad that people laugh is called the Aggarwal salad because it's like bigger than your head. And that's the greens part. So I have so many greens, and I have it's a massive salad. So you would not believe that I can eat the salad that's as big as it is, because it is literally this big. And
that's awesome.
Loaded. There's at least 16 ounces of chickpeas in there.
Surprise, surprise. I had no idea. It's amazing.
So I had so many chickpeas, or, I always have chickpeas in there, or hummus. And I often make a dressing out of hummus and balsamic vinegar. So I have loads and loads of chickpeas as well. So, and then for dinner, I often don't have dinner because I have a huge salad that sometimes takes me from 12 to 3 o'clock. I'll eat it at 12 and I'll eat part of it at 3. Sometimes I'll have some, I'm Indian, so just like you, but I'll often eat lentils and some brown rice, or like I said, I often don't eat dinner though. I find that unlike maybe because I'm older than you, my metabolism has slowed down a little bit. So I found that I just don't feel that hungry in the evening. I do exercise most days of the week as well, but because I do eat so much between that, like 8 a.m. to 3 or 4 p.m., I find I just don't need that dinner meal. And I feel lighter when I don't eat it. And so that's why I was curious about your intermittent fasting, how you handle it. So I often won't eat after 4 o'clock, and then I'll eat again the next day. And that works well because that's when I'm most active. I do my exercise. For exercise, I like to run. I'm obsessive about running, but I also started this thing called bar, which is ridiculous. Right? No joke, right?
No joke. Bar method is hard.
So it's so funny because I walked into that class the first time, and it's so funny because literally people, they talk so loud and the music's so black, you can't actually hear it so well. And people are moving and they're like, just move in, out, in, out. And I'm like, what are they doing? But they're sweating bullets. I have no idea what they're doing because they're doing all these micro movements, and I'm looking, I'm trying to figure it out because I can't really hear it. And now that I know what they're doing and do it too, I sort of laugh because I literally am sweating like crazy in these minimal movements. It is so intensive. So
you probably get incredibly sore the next day afterwards too.
Oh, I do. Yeah. But it's an incredible workout. And as a rheumatoid arthritis patient, I am always sensitive about my joints, and I run too much, and I'm trying to shift away from, because what I don't want to do is develop osteoarthritis on top of rheumatoid arthritis. And so I do run too much. And so I'm trying to shift away from more running. And I do find that bar is very nice because it's micro movements and low impact. And so I really like that as a blend. But those are the type of foods I typically eat during the day. I eat a load of fruit as well. I could eat mangoes till the cows come home. Like, I love to eat mango.
Yeah.
I literally buy cases of mangoes from the Asian store, and I have to hide a few of them on the side so my kids don't eat them.
Yeah, it's actually proof that you're Indian, because I did the same thing. But when I was a young kid, my dad used to come home. He used to go to the Indian store. He used to come home with a case of mangoes, and he would just put them on the table for dessert. And he'd be like, go eat. So rather than eating like cakes and pies and candy, we would just open a mango and just start going at it. And it just became an obsession. So I'm really glad to hear you say the same thing.
Oh yeah. It's funny because I'm married to a Caucasian man, as you know, and he likes mango, but he doesn't love mango like I do. And I told him, I said, that you've got still a long way to go to becoming Indian, because you're not eating mango. And in not Americans, but non-Indians, they eat it so nicely, and they cut it and they slice it out. And
totally
just grab it.
Yeah, you just stuff it in your mouth. That's it.
Give me the
That's
mango.
all you have to do.
Anyway, Cyrus, you're such a pleasure. This was so fun and interesting, and I love that. I feel like we're so in sync with the way we practice, and I really like what you offer patients, and because you do offer such a unique ability with the science, but motivation, and it's really special. And because you have type 1, I think that you're one of the few people that works incredibly well with type 1s, but also type 2 diabetics, because you can say, no, this is what I do. This is what I've learned. This is what I know. And you come at this with such vast experience, and it's such an honor for you to work with patients. And I'm so thankful that you're doing this great work. It's really amazing.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. Coming from you, that means the world. I mean, I know you have a vast, not only clinical experience, but also research backing. And when I first met you at one of the plant-based nutrition health conferences, I was honored to meet you in the first place.
Aww.
And then when we recognized that we basically talk the same game and treat the same game, you coming in from a cardiovascular perspective, me coming from a diabetes perspective, it's really just a true pleasure. So I appreciate being on this podcast, and I do hope this information really does help change lives.
Thank you.
No question.
Yes, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.